What are some myths and misunderstandings around records
My gosh. I think it's kind of twofold. You have the users within an organization that I like to do, and I do this thing called monthly myths of records management or something like that. And one of them is things like offsite storage. When I'm trying to explain to people, sending boxes of records offsite to storage, it's not expensive. A lot of people have had this mentality that it costs more to send it offsite than it does to let it sit in an office, right?
Yeah.
And so trying to show the ROI between that has been really helpful. I think that's a huge myth when it comes to that part of the organization, that records management has to be difficult. I think that's a huge myth. But also, when I think about the myths and how we apply these methodologies, when I have been interviewing people for roles that I've had open in my organizations, a lot of people will come out of school and they'll have gone into like a master's of library information science and some other things. And you learn there is a right way to do it, but it's very scholastic. And there's not this applied knowledge of how it can work in an organization. I think that's one of the myths. And so, especially for newcomers, is if you have this scholastic ability and you're learning and you're absorbing and you're reading through these books should give flexibility to what is appropriate and what's right in an organization. And you have to find the right balance. So, when people think about records, it's like, oh, compliance is black and white, and it's not black and white. It's very gray. And I think that's kind of where we find a good balance.
More myths or misunderstandings. We hit on a couple. Do you have any others?
I would say that records management is easy, could be one, or that it's difficult. Any other myths or misunderstandings?
Sorry.
I think it's that we all know everything.
Yeah.
A lot of times people come to us and they just assume that we know everything, especially like retention.
Yes.
Listen, retention schedules typically have several hundred items in it. And it's like, oh, don't you know what the retention is?
Yeah.
It's like, well, I need to double check. I also need to make sure what's happening because our industry is changing so drastically. Regulations are changing, expectations are changing. Staying on top of that is so challenging. And, some records managers are tucking privacy into that, and privacy regulations are constantly changing. I know there are several that are coming online here in the near future that you have to adapt to.
Yeah, and we're dealing with the GDPR in the EU, which is a whole new level that I've never experienced. And so getting into that level where you can get fined 7.5% of your GDP or whatever it is for your organization if you don't delete a passport within 6 months of
CCPA, CPR. I mean, all of them. And I think what's interesting is that every person you talk to, they are they're taking a look at these laws, these regs, and then they're interpreting them their own way.
Yes.
And privacy is a huge one.
Absolutely.
I don't want to talk on that because that's a whole nother podcast. But I think that's, for records management, it does evolve. It does get challenged. And I think one of the myths that I would love to bust is that records management, document management, information governance, that they're all the same.
Yes. Could you speak to IT about that when it comes to records management and document management?
It's just, but it's also interesting because every organization is different.
Yeah.
And some organizations call records management document management.
Yes.
And they have, because that's kind of the norm, and there's not that mentality of let's really understand what it is and what the disciplines are. And so I think that's something that I would say, get very familiar with what each one is so you can speak intelligently to it when people start to say, oh yeah, document management, yeah, I do that. And oh yeah, we're kindred spirits. And okay, yes, but let's talk about what that looks like versus what this looks like versus the the super discipline of really information governance, because records management is the core, in my opinion, to getting the rest of it right. If you can't get this part right, it's really hard to even do document management, document control. And then it's also very difficult to get into even the information governance, the IT space. So that's another myth that we could bust really quickly.